Okay. So I'm not going to be spending so much time explaining what's VPC, because I believe in our last class we talked about VPC. Today is going to be practical, hands-on. But however, there's no how we can start practical without staying lit you. So that for those of us that didn't really grab it, can grab. What's a VPC? A VPC is a virtual private network. It's a virtual network dedicated to AWS accounts. So I was explaining last time that AWS account, everybody has a VPC. I can use the same VPC CIDR block 10.0.0.0/16, and you will also use 10.0.0.0/16, like what we are going to see today. And at the end of the day, my own application will still run, your application will still run. They look the same, they have the same, almost like the same CIDR block, but we are not crashing the same way, because the VPC is not actually a network. It's actually a route path to your resources. So in essence, what network do? Network also actually create a path for you to either make use of resources or connect to something. So a VPC, this VPC is like a path that leads to your resources that you have in the cloud. You understand me? It's a path that, so it's unique. Every VPC has a unique ID to your account. It's not about the number, it's the unique ID. We are going to talk about the unique ID. Then, so that when you want to refer to your own VPC, you refer to that unique ID associated to your account. You can specify an IP address range for the VPC and hard subnet, associate with a security group, configure route table, and a subnet in a range of IP addresses. So they design it in a form of IP addresses. In regular, we know what's IP. I mentioned IP address. IP is Internet Protocol. Is the rules that guide the transfer of file from one place to the other. That is the protocol, the Internet Protocol. Internet means it connection from one place to the other. So it's in digits. So what's a subnet? In a VPC, which covers a region, if you want to be making use of resources, you cannot put your resources in the whole region. There's a particular availability zone. There's a particular area you will need to put your resources. So those zones have their own VPC, but that VPC is a sub of the main VPC of that region. So that's why it's called subnet. You know what I mean? Meaning a sub means a small chunk, of the main. You understand me? So when you have a VPC of 4/16, if you are taking the chunk of it, it's going to be 4/24. I want to see that. So that is a route table. Is every VPC has a gateway to the internet. It's called internet gateway. You understand me? So every subnet, for the subnet, you can either ask yourself, I want this subnet to have access to the internet, and I also want the internet to have access to it. And that kind of subnet is called public subnet, because public can access it, and you can also access the public. But there's another subnet that you can also have that you can only connect to the internet, but the internet cannot connect to it. That kind of subnet is called a private subnet. You know what I mean? So any instances you put in a public subnet is called a public instance. Any instance you put in private subnet is called a private subnet. Why do you create a public subnet and private subnet? Fine. Public subnet, you want people to have access to it. It's not always secure to have a public subnet, because people can access it and they can send you virus. So, but most times we use, if we want in a production environment, like this application we are running now is in private subnet, it's not a public subnet. But there's something they always use to access it. It's called elastic load balancer. It's called a load balancer. It can either be application load balancer, or I will explain that as we go. So this is it. So let's just rush through the literature while we're moving. So a virtual private cloud is an on-demand configurable pool of shared resources allocated within a public cloud environment, providing a certain level of isolation between the different organizations using the resources. So I'm just trying to explain what I just said before. It's just like a way of isolating myself. So meaning that I'm using my own subnet, you are only connected to my own resources. If you are using your own subnet, you're also connected to your own resources. I may use the same number, Are you getting me? You may use the same number, but how would they know that it's your own and it's my own? There's a key that is like a password. When I put that subnet and I put the password, they are in AWS already know who owns that key. They will link me to my resources. You understand me? So that's why I will go, anything I do on my system, please do it too. Don't worry, it will not clash. So if VPC has a subnet, has a route table, then has a security group, internet gateway, NAT gateway. Internet gateway means a gateway that allows the internet to connect to the resources and commands. While a NAT gateway is the gateway that does not allow the internet to connect to it, but it can connect to the internet. So it makes use of what we call elastic IP. I will explain to you later. Elastic IP is like an IP that has internet gateway to it, that is connected from the internet gateway. So we allow that NAT gateway to connect to the internet, but the internet cannot connect to it. You understand me? So if you are doing hacking, if you are doing virtual machines, if you are doing serious application that you don't want you want to control access, you mostly use a private subnet, but you attach a NAT gateway to it. A NAT gateway will just allow you to connect to the internet, allow that application to connect to the internet to update, but the internet cannot connect to it. So I'm going to send you some documentation where you read more of this, but we are not here for, but I just want to have an idea of what we're going to do. A CIDR block, maybe some of us have heard of the word CIDR block. It's called classless interdomain routing. It's a method of allocating IP addresses and for IP routing. So what does that mean? It means that the method I mentioned just now, that internet gateway is about how you connect to the internet, how the internet connects to you. For example, now let me bring it home. We have one Mr. Taiwo here. Okay, I want to connect to Mr. Taiwo. I can send, like, remember I mentioned one rope. Then when we are growing up, there's two, you always use a cup, they will put a rope, then that rope will take under somebody will also be in the other end. They will be talking to ourselves through that rope. You remember I mentioned it last time. So if I want to talk to Mr. Taiwo, and I will throw him that rope, I will have that rope. Yeah, I'll be talking. That line is called a network. You know what I mean? You see that line, the way it is, those things that guide that line so that the line will not cut in the road. You understand me? That protection that protect that line is called protocol. You understand me? So that line is the internet. Why the what guides that line so that it will not cut is called a protocol. You understand me? That's why it's called IP, Internet Protocol. So if that is an IP, there's a rule that they use to get those protocols. That rule is called CIDR, and it's called classless inter-domain routing. It's an IP addressing scheme that replaces the older system based of class A, B, and C. We have 5 class of IP addresses. So I'm going to send you this link so you can read about the classes. We have class A, class B, class C, class D, class E. You understand me? So there are many, but we are in this class, you're going to talk about class A, class B, and class C. So now let's move to the next thing. Then I talked about we have, as we are growing, everybody is growing, everybody is maturing. That's how the internet protocol are also maturing. Before they have version 1, version 2, version 3, version 4. The one we are mostly using now, that is mostly accepted, is called version 4 and version 6. That's why they call it Ipv4, Ipv6. Are you getting me? They have different way of naming their internet routing. So version 4, when you see 192.0.0.04/16, that 192 most times is called version 4. For version 6, it uses both 192 A, B, C, D. It's like it has like hexadecimal kind of way. It's not like the one we are using. You understand me? That has 192 dot this dot that. So we're going to be talking about the difference between Ipv4 and Ipv6. Ipv4 is what has been using, the word that has been adopted since 1993. But Ipv6 is trying to take over Ipv4, but at the moment, it's still not. Ipv4 is still preferred. So we're going to talk about why. That will be in our more next theory class. So in this VPC, they are different. Somebody was talking to me that I'm doing Azure. Can I learn AWS? I mentioned to him that all of them are almost the same. They have the same name, they have the same infrastructure, but they have different name. Like AWS call it VPC. They are all subnet in everywhere. You understand me? Subnet is subnet, but AWS call it VPC. Azure call it VNet. GCP, that is Google Cloud Platform, call it VPC. Why Oracle Cloud Infrastructure call it VCN, Alibaba call it VPC, IBM call it VPC, and other people just, they have different names, but they are the same thing. They are the same thing, they are the same grammar, are the same, the way they design it is the same design. So just that they have different name for it. So these are the classes of IP ranges. So any IP address that starts from 0 to 126 is called class A. Are you getting it? Yeah, class A. Then the one that starts from 128 to 191 is called class B. The one that starts from 192 to 223 is called class C. And there are so many I will be planning. So I'll also send the documentation to you. So, and there are some that are reserved, two are reserved. Most times, most government parastatal and highly secure. You know, government parastatal, they use high data. So it always comes from class A. So I will explain to you why you should not use anyhow. But it's not that in your VPC, you can use any class. You can even use 1.1.5. Your instance will still work. Just that you now have enough room. Your instance will still work. But there are some rules that you must follow through when you are using your IP address. Fine, it's all the class A to class F, class E is open for you to use. You understand me? But the more you use, the more the